Welcome to An Author's Journey, where a prominent author chats with us about their journey as a writer. I'm your host, Joe Pizzo. Today's featured guest is John Meehan, an educator with a passion for promoting gaming in the classroom. John is an English teacher and school instructional coach at Bishop O'Connell High School in Arlington, Virginia. He is a noted national speaker in the fields of classroom gaming and student-centered learning. His first book, Adrenaline Rush, was published in June of 2019 by Dave Burgess Consulting. The book offers a game-changing look at student engagement strategies inspired by theme parks, mud runs, and escape rooms. In July of 2020, Book Authority ranked the book among the top 10 titles on their list of the 100 best teaching books of all time. In March of 2021, John joined classroom gaming pioneer and author of Explore Like a Pirate, Michael Matera, as co-founders of EMC2Learning.com, an online members community that provides hundreds of gaming classroom resources and on-demand professional development to thousands of educators all around the world. In August of 2021, John and Michael published their first book together, Fully Engaged, Playful Pedagogy for Real Results. John is a 2017 ASCD Emerging Leader and an alumnus of the 2016 through 2018 Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Teacher Advisory Council. In 2016, he was named one of Arlington, Virginia's 40 under 40 by the Leadership Center for Excellence. In March of 2019, he created the hashtag Egg-Challenge, a classroom activity that became a viral video, racking up more than 75,000 views in less than 1 month's time, and spawning hundreds of classroom videos in 40 states, 6 Canadian provinces, and 8 countries. He is a past presenter at educational conferences throughout the United States, including the Annual Conference for National Catholic Education Association, ASCD Empower, and the Play Like a Champion Today Character Education Through Sports Conference at the University of Notre Dame. He is an avid runner who's completed more than 36 marathons, half marathons, long distance road relays, mud runs, and obstacle course races. Whew, that introduction's an obstacle course. Welcome, John, and thank you for taking an author's journey with us today.
Joe, thank you very much for having me on the show. You missed my most noteworthy achievement, though. I have to pick on you for that. In that my relationship to this podcast, my relationship to you actually comes from the fact that you went to school many years ago with the original John Meehan, my dad. And through happenstance, he says, hey, I ran into my buddy Joe the other day, and he's doing great things in education, and you should look him up sometimes. So I did my due diligence and found out all your plaudits through AMLE. And one thing led to another. We ran into one another at the AMLE conference virtually this year. And one thing, like I said, and here we are. So I'm very grateful to be my dad's scion and to be his protege and to connect here with you on the call. So thank you, Joe. I appreciate it.
As I said off air before we started, you remind me so much of your dad. You look like your dad, and you have his presence, his command, but also his kindness. I always remember him as having a very kind heart. And I know just from the little bit that we've been able to chat and the presentation I saw you give at AMLE, you have that same heart. He's raised, both your folks have raised an amazing son. Thank you. God bless them, and God bless you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Let's talk about teaching. I will say nice things about my dad until we're blue in the face, but then we only have an hour.
Okay, here we go. John, how did you first become involved in bringing games into the classroom?
I backed into it. I was a career changer with education. I went to school for English. I thought I was going to be a writer. I lied to myself and said that I would make $1 million as a writer. I think every young writer believes that. And so that the journey of an author leads me back to authoring, but many years later in a very different way. Like I said, it sort of backed into it. But in like 2010, I was working in public relations After graduating from college, I got my master's degree in English, and the economy started to go bad. And I was working in public relations, and I was trying to work my way up the corporate ladder. And there was no real joy in that work every day. I found myself just burning out, frustrated. And I said, well, if I'm not going to make a lot of money, I want to do something that I can make a lot of difference. I love writing. I love reading. And I lied to myself and I said, if I just got a teaching job, I would have more time to write and read, because teachers have a lot of time off. Any of your readers who are teachers know that is not at all the case at all. And I found that one out the hard way. But for me, because I had never worked with a classroom before, I didn't know the first thing. Like I said, the best thing about teaching is you get to talk about things you love all the time. The hardest part is you talk about it with people who don't love them nearly as much as you do. And so I was like, well, I know how to engage an audience from public relations. I know how to, engage a group from games. My dad was a coach in sports, things like that. My mom was a teacher, a homeroom mom, and Sunday school teacher as well. So I understood human connections, but I didn't really understand pedagogy, like teaching. And I was like, well, what if we just did this together in a way that made sense, like we weren't taking ourselves so seriously? If it was a game, how would this work, or how would this look? Because games are very beautiful like that. We sit down on the couch and we all gather around the table and we agree for this time to play by the rules. Now the rules are arbitrary. You can only roll this many dice or move this many squares. But okay, let's give it a shot. And for that time, when we all enter that magic circle, we're equals. We're learning together and we're leading together, and we're taking turns and we're doing all the good things that a good classroom does. And so for me, when I was working my first school, I was in the public schools just outside of Washington, D.C., achievement gap schools, students who needed a lot of support, 87% free and reduced meals, class sizes of 42 kids with desks for only 35. That very quickly can feel inhuman or dehumanizing. And I wanted to reclaim that human element. So I didn't know that there was a name for it. I was just like, we're going to play games. And through playing with purpose, we might be able to achieve real gains, to again show them we don't take ourselves so seriously all the time. We don't have to take it, this education system so seriously, but we're really serious about learning. And that to me was, I guess, the first mover, and I never looked back.
It's interesting when you say that bringing the games in to make a difference, because I played a lot of grammar games with a group I had one year that had such low test scores that the principal gave them to me and said, Joe, they're yours. Do something with them. Get those scores up. And so we would play games. I would find all of the mistakes that they would make in their writing, and forget worksheets and forget workbooks and textbooks and whatever. We would go up on the smart board and I would make the most silly sentences in the world, and they'd have to fix them. And I would incorporate the errors that they were making in those sentences. By the end of the year, I think it was something like 9 out of 12 kids passed the test that they hadn't passed before.
Yeah.
And part of it was turning them on to those games.
Well, I mean, I think what you're saying, Joe, is right on the money. There's a great researcher. Her name is Jane McGonigal. She wrote a book called Reality is Broken, and about the science of gameful design or game-based learning. And she says that games are a Trojan horse for deep learning. You let your guard down because you're not taking it so seriously. And suddenly you have to be very serious about the skills necessary to solve that problem, because games are fundamentally broken things that require us to fix them, the human to move them, right? They're infinitely patient and infinitely stupid things that will wait for you in a binary sit. If correct, you've earned the right to work on harder work. If not correct, you've earned the right to work on the same thing again. And that was very much my experience. I was, like I said, in the high needs school, in getting students to care about learning. I was able to get them to learn more, but that's without ever focusing on, you mentioned the marathons and that in my bio, which everyone says I run marathons. No one ever asked me my time on the marathon. But you can't run your best time if you're looking at the watch the whole time. You need to focus on the work. There's we talked about, the Catholic faith, which is my faith tradition. I work in a Catholic school, but there's a Buddhist philosophy, which I love, that says, if you want to achieve enlightenment, then you chop wood and you carry water every day. And when you've achieved enlightenment, how do you sustain enlightenment? You chop wood and you carry water every day. And that's it. You do one thing and do it again and again. How do you get good at jump shots or foul shots? You do jump shots, you do foul shots again and again and again till it becomes automatic. And muscle memory is that way. And what we know about the brain science about neuroplasticity, right? If it's done with joy, the myelination or the neural pathways light up, and our brains get heavier. Like it's sticking because we're enjoying it and we're lighting up new connections between point A and point B and finding new ways to make those same things happen again and again. Do they become automatic? And that could be grammar, that could be mathematics, that could be timelines and dagger drills, flipping open a book and coming up to a word, and not doing it where you're always focused on the grade. Because like I said, if you're running a marathon looking at the watch the whole time, you won't hit that finish line. Put one foot in front of the other, take a breath, chop wood, carry water, again, and again.
As people who admire English, both of us know the value of telling stories. And the research now is beginning to back this up, that the storytelling actually produces certain chemical changes in the brain and builds up certain sections of the brain. And so we have to encourage that as much as possible. Yeah, I think you're right on target with that. Now I'm going to do a little leapfrog here because I usually save a question like this for the end, but it seems to be—
We're done. I'm out. That was the end. Good podcast. Bye, everybody.
Seems to be right for the choosing now. So, there are people in schools who look at games in classrooms and the first thing they say is, I didn't send my kid to that school to play games.
Correct.
I sent them there to learn something. Why aren't you teaching them something? And I guess if it's nothing but games for 180 some days, well, anything in excess, that goes against Aristotle's golden mean.
Sure.
At the start. But how do you address people like that? Colleagues, parents, people in the community?
A lot of Jack Daniels. Is the answer. I have to take a few stiff drinks to calm it down. To be very honest, I hope you can hear it in my voice. I don't take myself so seriously. And I've had to learn how to do that through a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy, a lot of meditation, a lot of prayer, a lot of soul searching, a lot of falling down, hitting my knees and figuring out you have to pick your battles and you have to figure out who the man in the arena is, because sometimes the person who's doing the critique could not stand there in your shoes and do it. Back to that high school story where I started, I had 202 students, 202 or 204 students. The numbers changed through the year. I had classes of 45, 42, desk for 35. And I had the lowest of the low students coming in a school that had, like I said, 87% free and reduced meals. I had a 98% Black and Hispanic population, many of whom were from single parent homes, and they did not like school. Their parents did not like school. Most of them were raised by grandparents, aunts and uncles, and like in divided families where they'd said they had 4 or 5 brothers or sisters, quote, on their father's side. And that tells you all you need to know about what it looks like when they go home. So like to give someone who does not have, and this is not some sort of savior complex. This is like, I am in this job to be their biggest cheerleader, to be their biggest fan, to be their coach, to move away from this, I guess, this carceral pedagogy, which is I am the drill sergeant and they must execute the drills, to I am there on the sideline cheering for you at this marathon because you got 3 more steps to go. Before I got on the call with you, I was on my Peloton bike. And that virtual ride with Cody Bigsby, he's saying, push it 3 more minutes. You've got this. Go get this. And saying that to a human being today is fundamentally different because you showed up. And I'm really glad because I think you're amazing. I hope you can show up again tomorrow because today is different because you said that thing, because you did that thing. Now, I didn't mention Scrabble, Monopoly, Jeopardy, anything like that. I'm talking about a philosophy, a commitment to how I see education. And then early, going that way, if you focus on the grade, the learning suffers. But if you focus on the quality of a job well done with your whole heart, with your whole self, invariably you're going to get better results. So like those students got the second highest grades at the end of the year, not at my school, but in the entire county. And I was a first-year teacher because I just showed up and went all out for it. And when they see that you're all out, and I hope that people can hear that in my voice, like people say you shouldn't take the job personally, but like I vehemently disagree. I am all in. And when you see it, it comes through, and that energy is just as infectious as any pandemic could be. Like there's an electricity when we're in the room together. When you see Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson on TV as an actor, here's a charisma reaching through that screen that says, he's my guy. I really like that. You see the Lin-Manuel Miranda, the Hamilton thing, There's 20,000 words in that. It's longer than 3 of Shakespeare's plays. And yet kids will commit it to memory because if a person is captivated, you don't have to hold them captive. They're in with their whole heart. And I think that that's where the gameful mentality is everything in school is a game. There's badges, there's leaders, there's lists of who's the best and who's the worst. There's tests with right answers and wrong answers, which are multiple choice. It's just a game anyways. And if you can get past that, you say, well, it's a poorly designed game, so let's design a better one. And it's not rinky dink to make light of like real life trauma or real life suffering when you're dealing with hard issues, like we talk about Huckleberry Finn or the Holocaust. We don't ever want to make fun of people who have gone through hard issues. We're trying to empathize and trying to build that sense of humility to say, this is a hard thing. If you were in that same position, this is a no-win situation. How can we rectify so that the next generation doesn't have to go through that? That's the ultimate win. That's the ultimate like next level of a game. And that's not through crash simulations, not through dinky worksheets. That's not through, okay, you guys are the good guys and you're the bad guys, and let's escape the Underground Railroad. I'm not talking about anything like that. That the research is very, very clear that that's a bad idea. But the power of a story is there. You mentioned it, Joe, like that in medias res where when suddenly what? Everyone wants to hear what happens next. Hey guys, come on in, grab seats. It's good to see you. All right. So plot twist, everything changed in the United States in 1984. What? Yeah. It's on page 6 of the book. I don't know. We're not going to talk about that one. We have other things. What? Wait, Mr. Meehan, tell me more. Every kid's in. That's a light bit of a game that has an element of bring them in, right? And to anybody who would critique it, I said, a lot of Jack Daniels is a lot of time spent saying, hey, come see me do it. I'll put my money where my mouth is. I put a video on in my classroom when it's me teaching and I'm showing what my kids are doing, interviewing them like we're on ESPN while they're in the middle of, quote, the game as everyone is playing. I think we were habitualized to think that only certain games are appropriate for school, like Jeopardy. And I'm saying, no, we need to rethink everything. A gameful design approach to how we do so that it's a marathon, it's a sprint, it's a team event, it's a tough mudder, it's all esprit de corps. Everyone's working because they know the guy next to them's working. And there's a variable-based grading where if you're watching the Giants play the Jets, it's not the first team to 21 points wins. It's this game's going for 4 quarters. And if we have to go into overtime, we will. I don't know how good the other team's going to be, but you don't know either. So you better bring your best every single flipping day. And who doesn't want to show up for that?
I'm hearing a lot of passion in your voice, and I'm hearing also that you're not defining games maybe the way people might misinterpret games to be. What we do in classrooms don't necessarily have to have that so-called game structure, but they can be the poetry that you read and you get people excited about by maybe giving them a little bit of something. The global read aloud is something that I absolutely stumbled across and loved the first time that I used it in 2018. We read Alan Gratz's Refugee. And my middle schoolers were on the edge of their seat and I would time it so I would finish the chapter. He had short chapters as it was, but I would finish the chapter right before a period would close. And then 5 seconds, sometimes on the bell, I would take the book and go like that and close it. And they would all be hollering, no, right. Keep going.
Completely agree, Joe. And so if you're doing poetry, here's one for you. And if you're a teacher of not poetry, do it in your history class, do it in your science class. Hey guys, here's a photocopy from page 22 of the book or a poem. I'm going to give you a set of dice. I like to use the role-playing game dice because they're fun to hold in your hands. You can buy them at the store for $1 and you get 8 dice with it. If you don't have them, just grab any dice from any board game. Roll those dice. Whatever comes up on the top, count those dots. See what you got? That's the number of words you're allowed to keep from that page. Tell me the main idea of this, only using those pieces that you have. Every kid's I get to dig for secrets? No, you get to give me the main idea of a piece of paper. That's not particularly exciting. But when you present it in that way, it turns the corner. I'll do a game where they'll come in and it's all right, guys, so last night we read the first chapter of The Scarlet Letter. And I'll set them in teams. And to make it, period appropriate, I'll call them houses, right? The house of Hester Prynne, the house of Arthur Dimmesdale. And as they sit with their houses, red, blue, green, and yellow, on the board, it'll say, last night we read the first chapter of this book. And it's presented to them almost like a role-playing game. You saw the story of a woman named Hester Prynne who stood on the scaffold and would not reveal the name of the father of her illegitimate child. What would you do in that situation? Like a Dungeons and Dragons role-playing game. Would you A, say nothing? Because you know what? Things are pretty bad here, and this person is probably on the wrong side of the law. B, would you try to get the word out, but casually, because you don't want to get caught, because, you know, gossip is insidious here in Puritan Boston? Or would you C, stand up, do something right? Yes, you put your life on the line for this, but it's the right thing to do. You know what, guys? I'm going to give you 5 minutes to strategize with your teams. Come up with the best answer that you would choose. It doesn't have to be what the character chose, but find the evidence from the book about why you said what you said. Did I give away the first chapter as far as a plot summary goes? I did, 100%. But now for 5 minutes, every single kid is digging into that text to dig for evidence about why they're going to say what they said. Then they come back after 5 minutes. All right, let's hear from team A. Ooh, that's a pretty good argument, team A. Why did you say it? Team B, what did you say? Team C? Oh, team D? Here's the beauty part. They've just now heard from 3 of their peer groups. And in the first 10 minutes of class, that otherwise would have been a gotcha test. What was the man's name on page 7? When you catch kids, I call it summer reading, because some are reading and some are not. Most are not, right? They find their way to cheat through that game. So we build a new game and say, all right, guys, in the first 5 minutes, you're going to work with your team to find the best evidence. In the next 5 minutes, we're going to have a class-wide share out about why we said what we said, looking at high quality efforts from our peers and say, guys, it came down to the wire. I really like what team A said there. Team B was good. Team C was good. Oh, but team D, when you mentioned it, you used page numbers 3 different times. And for that reason, I'm going to give the nod for this one. Team D takes it for today. Oh, team D is all excited. The other one's like, can we play again? Sure, tomorrow. And read chapter 2 again. And that's it. Like, that's not particularly advanced, like mechanics where there's like points and badges and skill trees and leaderboards. That's approaching an old thing with a new life that makes today's kids say, hey, this feels like a game that I would play at home. Yep, I get to borrow against the greatest literature ever written and tell that story of, you know, bullying, blaming, shaming, ostracizing, isolation. What kid doesn't feel that stuff today? Finding what matters to them in this stuff helps them see themselves in this stuff. And then the sooner I can get there, I could make them jump through hoops of fire.
It's wonderful that you're using gaming not to be, okay, you need a certain amount of equipment, you need this hookup, you need whatever. It can be just kids going in there, and the research they're doing is getting them to do text evidence, which
100%.
you know is absolutely critical as you go through the remainder of your academic career, no matter where you start. That inference is a skill that they work on, heck, in the business world. I mean, you were in the business world, you know, it's tough to get the average worker in the business world to be able to take a document and infer things from that document to apply them. And
well, I completely agree. And what the beauty of it is, Joe, is on day 1, that's how we'll play the chapter 1 game. And then we'll do some other activity for the rest of the class period. For the day 2 game, the very first thing that every group is going to do is make sure they have text evidence, and they're going to grab their pens, because that was the difference maker from day 1. And now you're not talking about competing against an arbitrary standard. Write down 3 facts from this chapter. It's a variable-based grading that, look, every day this game's going to get harder. And level 2 work is, of course, going to be harder than level 1 work. You play Mario Brothers, you get to level 8, they don't make you sit down with a piece of paper and say, how did you get here? They just give you harder problems. They presume that you've mastered those skills in the path that took you from point A to point B. So that rising tide lifts all ships every day of the unit. And the stuff that got the gold medal, the first place finish on day 1, would never even rate by day 5 or day 7 or day 10. So if you push that 180 days, how much more nuanced is the conversation then when they're accounting for counter arguments, or they're saying, well, the text evidence suggests, but I would also say they're getting longer and stronger, building stamina, building confidence. Who wouldn't want their kid to be in that classroom?
And what kid wouldn't want to be in that classroom? It's the idea that it's an inviting classroom. That's a key. And you and I both believe this, that when you walk into a classroom, you know in the first 5 seconds, oh, do I want to be here? Or, oh, why did anyone think I want to be here?
Yeah. As an instructional coach, I have the great blessing of having a chance to hang out 5 out of 7 periods in other classrooms, working with teachers. And it's tough because when teachers are being observed, we think if we put on our best show, right, it'll if the kids play by the rules, we ask the right questions and they follow the script, then we'll get a good review. And some places that is true. But I think more often than not, I've shifted my approach from sage on the stage through guide on the side to become an impresario with a scenario. Hey guys, in a world where X, Y, and Z, what would you do? And then you just get out of the way. The best teaching becomes invisible. And that's awesome, because when it works, that time is flying, and I'm not doing anything other than just poking the fire and saying, that's a good question. I'm more like Jeff Probst on Survivor, watching the competitors just race and push and go. And that all I have to say is, yeah, you're doing it. Keep doing it. This is great. What kind of crazy new steps could we come up with? And then when we're done with, quote, the game or that unit, we take time to debrief. How did this work? Let's set goals for ourselves. If we had a chance to do it again, if we had a chance to change this, quote, game or this unit for the next time through, what are some twists and turns we might throw at it? You guys can help me co-create this, not just for the next unit that you'll do, but for the next year of students, so that the game feels more student-centered. Everyone wins when they have a chance to hit that really high Bloom's taxonomy. They're, evaluating and creating, but they have to do it with all of that content knowledge they brought with it. And I still cover every curricular standard every single time.
And giving the students the dignity of having the chance to have input, to have a say, that I can see what this assignment is for me as a student, but then I can also look through the lens as a student and say, okay, I'm worthy enough to give feedback and help to design this. So my opinion is valued, and therefore, by logical extension, I, as a person, am valued. Yeah, that's the class I want to be in. Not only do we have fun here, but I also get to contribute in a major way.
Yeah.
And so the next year when somebody's doing this, I can say, yeah, I remember when we helped to design that one, and this is the suggestion we made. And what did you think of that suggestion?
Correct. And I mean, like when you see a student, like when you model vulnerability, students feel comfortable giving answers that they're not sure are finished answers yet. I think so often in life, your podcast is called An Author's Journey. That's like the verb thing that we have to do is the journeying, right? We only see the destination sometimes, and we say, it must have come out of his head fully formed. Perfect. And it's like, no. If I wrote 20,000 words, I probably had 60,000 edits to get to 20,000 words. And I think it's important to model that, to show them like, hey, I'm a work in progress like you guys are. And in this unit, let's rate me like we'll rate ourselves and set goals for ourselves as well as for this class going forward. That's an incredibly empowering thing for learners of any age, because then they can start to see signs that I used to be at place X. Now I'm at place Y. I'm really looking forward to getting to place Z. Because it's not about moving every child from an arbitrary point A to an arbitrary point B. It's about moving every child from their point A to their point B. And seeing at every turn, they're taking the best steps they can. And if they're not, they should be held accountable to say, how can we get you to that next step? And if they're doing it well, rewarding them with harder answers and harder questions to say, all right, I think you're ready for level 2 work, level 5 work, varsity level 27 work. And scaffolding on the fly in an invisible differentiation, where if group 1 and group 2 are working on the same project, but group 1 is falling behind, you come over and you give some of that coach up stuff to help them get back to the baseline. Group 2 is killing it. You come over and give some clarifying questions that push them in a much harder direction. So when they turn in the work, you're not grading for the exact same arbitrary standard. You're saying, I know group 1 is at level 1. I know group 2 is at level 7. I'm going to hold them to that standard. They already have an A. They've long since passed the mark for an A. But the worst thing you can hear in a classroom and when you assign any activity is, how many things do we need to put on this? How many things do you need to be on this? Like, I don't know, because you don't know what the other group's working on right now, man. So push yourself to your best self. Because then when I grade group 2's work, I'm like, okay, they're already doing the necessary skills. Let's talk about the enrichment skills. And then when I work with them afterwards, I can say, now let's go to the enrichment of the enrichment of the enrichment. Much better than write down the 5 things you found in the chapter. Yes, it's the same 5 things that everyone else found. Some of you guys could have gotten this in a text message or an email. Bye. So.
And somebody from a remote place that never has seen you before in your life has created lessons for you that now you shouldn't be taking and just implementing. That's not teaching. That's facilitating at best.
Yeah, I mean, like, we're master chefs, Joe. I mean, like, I'm not saying that with any ego or any hubris. You got into teaching because you saw yourself as an educational creator. You wanted to instill a love of learning and like a rich appreciation for the palate of how to taste this stuff and how to savor it. And you are reducing yourself to being like a fry cook, where you're just taking it and saying it's the frozen package. Would that I could change it, back into the fryer it goes. Yeah, it's greasy. It's not particularly healthy for them. Maybe I'll put a little bit of chocolate sauce on it to help them dress it up. No. I'm trying to train their palates, and I'm a master chef. I have to trust my knowledge of all of my tools, all of my skills, and trust my students that they're here because they should want to learn this stuff because they're innately curious by design. That's back to Aristotle. All men by nature desire to know. And it's not all men of a certain age desire to know, or of a certain background or certain race. There's no Pokemon achievement gap. Black kids don't learn Pokemon different than white kids do. There's no, gay kids learn Monopoly different than straight kids do. Girls learn the game of Clue different than boys do. There's all men by nature have a desire to be innately curious. So how do we get that curiosity? How do we spark that with a little bit of salt to bring out the flavor of what makes these lessons exciting and good? And that makes them want to have a lot more on their plate than just the sugars and the fries.
And once you standardize things, it all becomes the same, and the same is not a one size fits all that helps everybody. It's a one size fits all that just tastes the same.
Yeah, I agree with that. And kids have wised up to that. And the second you give that off the shelf worksheet that you got from Teachers Pay Teachers, look, we've all been there, and I empathize because sometimes we're out of time and we're out of money. So that's what we get, and we don't get upset. But I think what ends up happening is students can smell a rat. And when they feel that you've kind of phoned it in on them, they're like, if this is what this game is, students figured out how to play the game of school a long time ago. 10 nights of homework. And if you're not grading it, then they're not going to do it. So you're going to grade it 10 points a night. And they're like, okay. And they come in with perfect scores every homework. And you figure out real quickly, you have really smart kids, or you got kids who've outsmarted the system. They're sending a text message with, I'll do the math if you do the science,
right?
You do the English. They get 10 perfect scores in the book, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. That feels like 10. They get to the big test. Okay, fine. 10 days of great homework, 100 free points in the bank, one big test worth 100 points because that's what we're supposed to do. And they all die on that test because they've done no real work for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But we have, you got a 60 on the test, Billy, but you had 100 points in the homework. You just need to study harder. You're a bad test taker. I'll call it an 80%, a B- on average. You brought in some hand sanitizer, I'll give you a B. And, I like the cut of your jib. We'll call it a B+. And we'll move on to unit 2, rinse and repeat. That game is broken because they figured out how to hack that game. So we need to change that game in a way that the only way through it is to do it.
You mentioned hand sanitizer, so I'm going to go to remote and hybrid learning because, boy, that has impacted us tremendously.
Yes, sir.
I'm wondering if you found that with this remote and hybrid learning that we've been forced to deal with, what are those challenges doing to your efforts to keep gaming in the classroom? Have they made it easier? Have they made it more difficult? Have they made it just different?
Different. I that's a great question. And I saw you kind of stammer as you tried to read that question. Like, how do you even talk about COVID? It's like the air we breathe, quite literally. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
And it feels like just when you thought it was gone, it's back at full volume. And, I had COVID back in the first wave before vaccinations. I just had it. I got over Omicron, a week ago. You still hear my voice a little bit. I'm still hoarse. Gratefully, my school has been on snow days for this 5 days, so I'm not, spreading to my kids. But I don't think it's an accident that the most popular game for the kids in the last year on the internet was a game called Among Us. It was on their phones because I think everyone is just so desperate to be social and to be socialized, and it's really hard. My students wrote it in one of their surveys at the end of a unit. The kid, I'll call Bob. He wrote down. He says, these 6 feet distances feel like they could be 6 miles. In these masks, I never feel like I get to see my student, my classmates. And I empathize with that. What a game does, though, is it says, hey, like Olive Garden, when you're here, you're family. So let's get around the table and play. There are challenges when we shift to remote, but I'm grateful enough that I work with students who know what's up. I mean, they're high school students. And hey, guys, games can be broken down into 3 components. There's a theme, you're on teams, and there's a task. And if I could replicate themes, teams, and tasks in a remote environment, I can do that with breakout rooms. Hey, guys, so today we're going to talk about a debate with the Scarlet Letter. This is the prompt. You saw Hester print on the scaffold. What do you do? I'm going to put 4 of you guys in room A, 4 in room B, 4 in room C, 4 in room D, and I'm going to cycle through about 5 minutes worth of work, come up with some ideas, some text evidence. I'll come back and we'll calibrate. Okay, fine. It's the same. It's not the same, but it's a close photocopy. But then changing the type of quote games you can come up with. Hey guys, today we read the first chapter of The Great Gatsby. I want you to go home tonight and draw a picture of what that chapter meant to you. Draw at least 2 images in there. Draw at least 2 big words that stood out to you, and draw at least 2 quotes from the chapter that made it on, almost like a graffiti page or a billboard. Billboards play a large role in that advertising, and the Gatsby story is about advertising and the capitalism. Right. And then every kid's coming back in on the next day to show, all right, here's what I made. It's like a gallery walk with their peers, and to tie them in so that the ones who are learning from home still have access to the ones in the classroom. They'll take a picture of what they've drawn, the picture of their picture, and put it into a Google slide deck that all of their peers can see. So we get to be among one another, even if we weren't physically in the same space. And now, because it's being seen by somebody else, there's an educator, his name is Rushton Hurley. He's brilliant. He says, when students write for an audience that's just a teacher, they're okay if it's just good enough. But if they're writing for an audience that is authentic, they want it to look good. So if the game was turning into Mr. Meehan, you're gonna get a lot of junk, a lot of bad pictures, and look, I'm fine with stick figures, but I need to see text evidence in there. I need to see some color in there. I need to see some energy, some life. If they're doing it and the whole class has this portfolio, even the most stick figure of stick figures is drawn with a little bit of intentionality, a little bit of love. And now they're saying, I kind of look forward to it. I'm getting emails from parents saying, my kid is loving reading because you've just changed the way that we think about reading. Necessity being the mother of invention, I wouldn't have thought to do it that way. I would have had another way in my class. We used to play with Lego bricks in class. Hey guys, we're all going to build out of Legos. What would you get if you read chapter 1? Build the coolest thing that stood out to you from the text so far and explain it. Can't play with manipulatives in class, can't work the same way. Okay, fine. But they can draw pictures. We can do a lot of that stuff. And it's forced me to go low tech. It's forced me to go no tech, and then find ways to use limited technologies to get them back in. We have themes, teams, and tasks. Our theme today is we're billboard creators. Our teams are, you're going to be working by yourselves. Our task, make a billboard with 2 images, 2 words, and 2 quotes. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye. Or we're working in teams, work together, come up with that best debate, and come back and tell me why. It's a rinse and repeat cycle that forces us to remember that I think Rabbi Michael Cohen wrote a book called, I have it right over here, blanking on the name. It's called Educated by Design.
Educated by Design.
Educated by Design. But in his book, he says the creativity is not a skill set. Creativity is a mindset. And I mean, like that's it right there, man. Like, we don't have to play with dice. We don't have to play with, Dungeons and Dragons, Mario, Monopoly. We have to put ourselves in that playful headspace, that gameful design, that, okay, obstacles. How do we overcome them? And again, and again, and again.
What was the process for you deciding it's time for me to share my ideas with other educators? When did that epiphany come?
So I was working at O'Connell Story. It's a funny one. I was working at O'Connell High School, and my principal said to me, he saw me in the hallway one day, and I was leaving mass early, which as a Catholic, I know that like the first person who left mass early was Judas, and that doesn't end well for my eternal soul. So he saw me in the hallway, and I had to get very, stammering. I was trying to get back to my class to unlock it for the students. He's like, hey, what are you doing? I clammed up, and he says, what do you see your education career looking like? And I was like, honestly, I want to change the world. I want to change the world. And he says, I appreciate that sentiment. He goes, and I'll tell you quite, point blank, the energy you bring to your classroom is real, and it's palpable. And if I had a school full of you as an educator, the line would be out the building for kids applying to be here. So have you ever thought about stepping into a role as an instructional coach? And I said, hey, that sounds great. And then he said, all right, I'll be in touch. He walked away, and then I immediately grabbed my phone and I Googled, what is an instructional coach? Because, when the principal says, would you do it? You just say yes.
Sure.
And I was just trying to get out of being in trouble for walking out of mass early. Came to find out that instructional coaches are observational, non-evaluative, and we're here to be, your biggest sounding board, your biggest cheerleader, your biggest, shoulder to cry on sometimes, to say, have you thought about X? Have you thought about Y? But never, don't do it this way. Just have you considered all these options? And it echoed so nicely what I was doing in my classroom. So that I probably stepped into that role maybe 8 or 9 years ago. And then I launched a teacher Twitter, my own Twitter. I was just posting excerpts from my classroom, things like that. And tweets become, oh, that's cool. Can you tell me more about that? 140 characters goes to 280 characters. 280 characters turns into, I could probably write a short blog post about that. So tweets become blog posts. Blog posts become proposals for conferences. Conference proposals become conference sessions, breakout sessions. You get 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 of those, and suddenly you have a lot of stuff. People say, you should write this down. You should make a book out of that. And then one thing leads to another. So again, it's chop wood, carry water, right? Do one thing, the thing in front of you. And when that thing is working, take the next logical step that comes from it. It's not rocket surgery. It does take a lot of work, but it's not an impossible task to get from where you are to, I think, where you aspire to be.
You have a lot of different skills as a writer and designer of educational games. And my question is, what skills that you possess as a writer and a designer of educational games do you find that you're able to bring to your own students?
I hope a curiosity and honesty. I hope that those two things really do go hand in hand. I think Walt Disney says, we don't stay in one place too often because we're curious. We keep moving forward.
Right.
And I think that is something that I lead with my students. David Bowie, my dad's a big David Bowie fan. And he said, there's a great David Bowie quote we wrote in the book. He says, I think I'm a verb, I don't know where I'm going, but I promise it won't be boring. There's something about that I think I really want to let my students in on. Like, I see myself as a rough draft. I see myself as a work in progress. And to tell students, this is my latest thought on how this is working, but I could be wrong. And always leading with that, to say, I'm curious to just give it a shot. And I think when we model that vulnerability to our students, even students with profound trauma, for them to hear that this adult who has it all figured out. I remember vividly a conversation I had with one of my students who was struggling in my first year. After school, he was in detention or whatever it was, and I saw him at the end of the day. And I just, talked to him. I'll call him Nate. And I was in a conversation like, Nate, what's going on with you, man? What's up? And he's like, well, it's all easy for you. You're Mr. Awesome. And I was like, no, not quite on the contrary. I am not. I appreciate that I come across that way. I hope you can hear it. You can hear my energy, my passion for this stuff. But I'm flawed and broken like everybody else is. And I think that for me, once I started leaning into that, I was able to do a lot more in the classroom, that empathy to say, hey, I'm going through it like you're going through it, mental health, all those things, to be curious in spite of the hard stuff, and to own up, this is not automatic for any of us. So like I said, curiosity and honesty, I hope that those are two that I bring to the fore.
Now, I know there are youngsters as well as adults who would like to write their own books, possibly about gaming. So do you have any advice for them?
Yeah. Reading is breathing in, writing is breathing out, right? You got to read a lot, man. And but it should never feel like work. Through some happenstance, through luck or providence or fortune or fate or, SpongeBob or Jesus or Buddha, I find myself in a place where I get paid to talk about games. And that's awesome, right? I never had to grow up. I have a closet full of 200, 300 board games. And I say that reading is breathing in and writing is breathing out, but I mean, you are what you eat. And if what you're breathing in is a lot of junk TV, a lot of doom scrolling on your phone, delete Facebook for a day. Be intentional about what you consume. So for my first book, I would talk about theme parks, mud runs, and escape rooms. Then someone told me afterwards, if you write about those things, that's your business. And you can write those off as business deductions when you go to Disney World. I'm like, wait, that's a thing? I think that's amazing to say, oh, I get paid to talk about what I was doing. I was running marathons anyway. So write down, here's where the overlap is. Write about what you love. In the new book, Michael and I came together and put our chips together for the work he was doing with gamification, the work I was doing with, high energy student-centered learning. And we're talking about the science of how and why people love doing things that are hard, voluntary attempts to overcome unnecessary obstacles, and to give yourself a position to say, all right, so if I have a chance to watch the same rerun of the same television show a million times, or to play a board game with my family tonight, I'm going to play a board game. And I'm going to, after we play the board game, talk about what about this did you like? What, like I said, I'm not really fun at parties because I'm constantly working, but then you do what you love and you never work a day in your life. Okay, I go to Disney World and I'm reading about all the Disney stuff. I'm going on a marathon. I'm running and I'm reading about all the training stuff, doing an escape room, have friends texting, hey, want to go to an escape room today? And thinking about all the ways they design those things. You play a new board game. Hey, the latest board game came out, a new video game. I don't have to be particularly tech savvy to just have an ear to the ground and finger on the pulse on that stuff. And if you care about it, whatever you love, like make that what you consume. Yes, Facebook is fun to stay connected with one another, but if you delete it from your phone, you can still log on your computer. Be intentional about what you consume. Breathe it in, breathe it in, breathe it in. Start a small blog, start a small Twitter, start a small podcast, and just talk about the things that you love. Build that vocabulary, that stamina to say, hey, I can do a lot of this stuff. Yep. Tweets become blogs, blogs become, proposals, proposals become presentations, presentations become chapters, and you're off to the races.
Other plans for another book?
Always, 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 always. Yeah. I think we'll be writing, Michael and I together, for the next 25 years.
Anything specific or just general at this point?
Well, that's a great question. We have some ideas percolating and it's all like in the background, but I think if if you want to see God laugh, make a plan. And I think, Dwight Eisenhower said, planning is essential. Plans are useless. But I published my first book in 2019. I published my second book in 2021. And so if you do the off-cycle math there, you're like, okay, well, you were writing your first book in 2018 into 19. Then I guess 19 I published, then 20 started writing, 21 published. We're now in 22, so I'm due to start writing again pretty soon. And it's just, again, this is what I'm breathing in, the science of how we play, how we set courses for change, how do we reclaim the intentionality for little things that make big differences in our classrooms. And again, modeling for our students, it's different because you showed up today. And I think I neatly found a cool niche where we talk about, play and games, and that's joyous, but that's an infinite runway to talk about those things because there's always new games and always new science. Year over year, board game sales for the past 7 years are always up year over year because people just crave human connection. So how does that look in light of COVID? How does that look now coming back from COVID? How do we build in, I guess, the fear for teachers is we feel like we have all these bricks we have to put in this bucket because there's so much to carry in the year and we only have so much bucket space to do it. But we forget that the mortar that binds those bricks together is the social emotional learning, the human connections. If you're just stacking bricks on bricks on bricks, students will grate and students will tap out because they feel weighed down by it. So how do we bind it? How do we connect it? And I think that's, the research science behind it has been, geeking out. I'm reading a lot about Marion Diamond and the work of neuroplasticity right now. This is what I do in my free time. I'm really fun at parties.
And TEDx must be at the top of your list.
Yeah, fingers crossed. One day they're going to give me a call.
Okay. Now, final question. I know a lot of our colleagues are on social media and will follow you on social media. How can they do that if they're not already following you?
Awesome. So if you're not on the social media side of things, I get it. Some people are just, scared off by the Twitter, the Facebook, the MySpace, the My Pages, or whatever the kids are on these days. TikTok, I still don't understand it. My website is emc2learning.com. That one's available on any device in the world. Michael and I pushed our chips together and we created a playful community for educators who want to do more with play-based learning, game-based learning. We have a free membership available there, and we have, for those who are available and interested in supporting the cause, we have hundreds of resources. We have over 300 resources there on that site for the paid membership, community events, things like that to connect with us, and hangout discussion forums, webinars, things like that. And again, that's no social media. That's all closed community. So you can get in there and know that it's not just out to the world. If you want to hang out on the Twitter machine, I'm busy on Twitter. I've been quieter in the past 6 months because, with the work with the book, it's been very busy, and now launching the site and, the company together. But I'm on Twitter at Meehan, EDU. That's Meehan, like my last name. M as in Mary, EEHAN, and then EDU, like education. I love education. I want to get better at it. So Meehan EDU. And I hang out there. I have a podcast that I release every Monday. It's been on a brief sabbatical as I recover from COVID, but it's called Talk to Me in the Car with 2 E's. And I talk about education. Like I said, I'm not fun at parties. I just love working and doing the work with people who are willing to do it. And if you're willing to do the work, I'll hang out with you at any time, gladly.
John Meehan, thank you so much for taking an author's journey with us today. You're definitely an educated and visionary educator. Dedicated, committed, and a person that I think every kid would love to have as their teacher. I know I would be honored if I were in your classroom, either observing or maybe participating in a lesson. and you only want the best for your students. I can see that. I can hear that in your descriptions, and just the way you talk. This is the job that you should be doing. This has been an absolute joy to have this opportunity to take some time with you today. And I greatly appreciate your kindness. So thank you for joining us.
God bless you, my friends. Stay safe. And thank you again for the opportunity. If you need anything, reach out, hit me up on Twitter, and let's change the game. Let's change the world.
Well, that concludes our journey for this day. Tune in again for more conversations with more authors of interest. For An Author's Journey, I'm your host, Joe Pizzo. Have a wonderful day.